Good morning, and thanks for joining us for this News 13 special honoring Black history, sharing our stories. I'm Annette Pegler. This morning, we will bring you stories of African Americans who are making a difference in communities across South Carolina and beyond. We began this morning in Horry County. The history of slavery bears an uncomfortable past for many African Americans, and the decades that followed presented struggles. But farming, something all Americans benefit from, helped Black folks in Burgess thrive. And now the only living farm museum there, Freewood's Farm, shares the story of their survival.
The end of the Civil War, when Sherman started marching through the South, Black people started leaving those plantations. And by the end of the war, of course, they were all free to leave the plantations. And a lot of them left. Very few stayed.
Nestled in a small town miles away from the Myrtle Beach coast lies Freewood's Farm, a community that tells the story of what African Americans did during the first century of freedom, 1865 to 1960.
Most of them became farmers. Most of them sharecroppers, of course. A few were able to own their own lands.
The 40-acre property is land inherited by president of Freewood's Foundation, O'Neal Smalls.
One of the proposals made during that period was to give each family 40 acres and a mule. And Black people became attached to that notion. They wanted the 40 acres and a mule. They didn't get it. So we represent that 40 acres the newly freed slaves did not get.
The original group of farmers in Freewoods came from Longwood's plantation right up the road. Smalls's great-grandfather was part of the first generation of more than a dozen Black families in this area. His father was a World War I veteran.
They all played a major role in helping us develop Freewood's Farm, providing a lot of background.
So how did African Americans survive during this period?
During that first century that we're talking about, cotton was the cash crop for most of those farmers. They helped to develop the greatest agricultural industry in the world. I think everybody agrees that the United States agricultural industry is second to none.
Black families built their own churches.
They started first with bush huts. And then, of course, later on, they were able to get lumber and build those churches.
And their own schools.
You have some that were built primarily by those farmers. Morris College, for example. Tuskegee, for example.
At present day, Freewood Farms is still an active farm in the Burgess community, but it also serves as an educational opportunity for people, highlighting what this land stood for and its history.
We grow string beans and butter beans and sweet corn and sweet potatoes.
Some of the original houses Smalls's ancestors lived in are still standing tall.
So they went from those bush huts to places like this in the 1940s and 50s.
At the turn of the century, Freewood's Farm became a museum with a goal of educating people who live and visit the Grand Strand. Oh, there it is.
They can come for tours, and they can help us. We rent out this building for weddings and family reunions and conferences and what have you. And of course, this helps to support the farm.
Smalls says sometimes it's uncomfortable to hear the history of slavery and the century after, but he hopes Freewood's Farm will continue to educate so the hard work of his ancestors is never forgotten.
And no one can deny that Black people played a major role in helping to develop that agricultural industry. They helped to develop the greatest agricultural industry in the world.
If you'd like to check out Freewood's Farms, it's open Monday through Friday. Black History Month began as Negro History Week in 1926. The second week of February was chosen because it fell in line with Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass's birthdays. The idea started in a YMCA on the south side of Chicago. Lauren Jiggets takes us to the building that houses the history of Black History Month.
This building was history.
Remember the past, restore the promise. It's reflected in every painstakingly restored detail of the former historic Wabash YMCA in Bronzeville. Built in 1911 and completed in 1913, it was largely financed by Julius Rosenwald, the president of Sears Roebuck, and it became the first YMCA for African Americans in the Midwest.
Because this was the place. This was the only place.
The building often found itself at the intersection of race, perseverance, and progress.
So because it was the YMCA, it was considered a safe space.
Patricia Abrams is the executive director of the Renaissance Collaborative. They took on the challenge of restoring the building and preserving its history.
I just had to take a stance that we will not tear it down and put a marker up and say this was. We just needed to work with everybody to save it. And I think that was a testament of what the Y had meant, this particular building had meant to the African American community from the time that it was developed in 1911.
And the preservation of history is the heart and soul of this building. It was here at 38th and Wabash that Black History Month was born. Dr. Carter G. Woodson had been barred from attending American Historical Association conferences despite being a dues-paying member. Inspired by his experiences at the Y and the Bronzeville neighborhood, he and a small group met here at the YMCA and formed the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. And in 1926, he created Negro History Week.
It was really around lifting up those African Americans who had made great contributions to the American society, but they were not recognized as such.
Dr. Woodson found little desire amongst white historians to recognize Black history, so he sought to record and preserve those accomplishments on his own.
Most of them had been stolen. And you know, when you steal something and put a patent on it, it becomes yours.
And while Woodson was preserving history here, the building fueled the present. It was an academic, social, and cultural center. Babies were weighed here. African Americans finally had a place to learn to swim, and women joined the swim team. Pullman porters had a place to sleep, and it was a place for men to collect their paychecks during the race riots.
This was considered a safe space. So although people could not cross over State Street, they could take the train to work. They could only pick up their checks here.
In the ballroom, William Edward Scott unveiled this mural in 1936, a young man in a big city looking at the original YMCA symbol, surrounded by avenues of opportunity. And yet the once bustling rooms here grew quiet, and the building fell into disrepair in the 70s.
Most of this was in shambles.
It was a long journey. The Renaissance Collaborative fundraised and found specialized craftsmen to tackle the intricate details.
The community has a role to play in the safety and welfare of future generations. So we saved this building primarily for the people who were going to come afterwards.
And it's still a work in progress, but it's a living landmark over 110 years of history that continues today. It is once again a community resource, including supportive housing, job training, and a culinary program. A rebirth for the historic Wabash YMCA.
I think when we don't remember our past, we forget from which we've come and how far we've come.
Honoring Black history continues after the break. We'll introduce you to a midwife in South Carolina who shares the importance of recruiting more Black healthcare professionals. Welcome back. Early African American midwives were important members of their community, even among enslaved individuals. News 13's Maya Lockett spoke with a midwife about the history and challenges of Black midwives in the South. Maya.
Tiffany Townsend was the first Black midwife in West Michigan and one of the first in South Carolina. She told me she moved to South Carolina because she saw the need for people of color in the health industry. Tiffany Townsend has been doing birth work for 7 years, starting off as a doula and eventually becoming a licensed midwife.
They're really sharp, okay?
There you go. I was looking for a midwife that would be able to relate to me and my culture and, you know, my upbringings without me having to explain like my isms and things like that. And I couldn't find one. I searched high and low. I expanded my search even further, like 2 hours I was willing to drive and I couldn't. So I was like, well, if I'm looking for this, I know that I'm not alone.
For the next 5 years, Townsend would give Black families hope, especially in South Carolina.
Everybody says the same thing, like, we have been praying for you. Like, we didn't know who it was going to be or when they were going to be here, but like, we've been praying for you. Like, we are so happy that you're here.
Black midwives make up 3% of the home birth midwifery population, which is why she says there needs to be more healthcare providers who understand the culture of Black people.
Something as simple as a Mongolian mark, like if your provider is not educated and understands like melanated skin, I've had clients have CPS called on them or Child Protective Services called because of a birthmark on their baby's bottom because the provider thought that it was abuse.
Townsend says the lives of Black pregnant women have been greatly impacted by the lack of people of color in the healthcare industry for centuries.
We have issues in healthcare that we are not interested in addressing because it forces us to have to look at like the history of a thing. And so the history of obstetrics and gynecology is really starting with practicing medicine on people that were enslaved and non-consenting, right? And so if that's the inception of a thing, then the energy of that is going to continue.
Black pregnant or postpartum women are dying 3 to 11 times more than white women, depending on where you are in the country.
Black bodies are not broken. There's nothing wrong with our bodies. There's nothing wrong with us. The system in which we have to surrender to in those moments is not adequate to handle us.
Townsend says Black midwives have played a critical role in improving the care and outcomes for Black families, especially in the South.
Midwives literally saved the Black community. There was a long time where we were not even able to participate in hospital care. So like, where were people giving birth at during that time, right? It was Black midwives.
Until the late 19th century, most births were attended by midwives, many of whom were Black, Indigenous, or immigrant women. Slave owners used African American midwives to ensure the reproductive health of enslaved women and the health of newborns to expand their labor force. It was also common for midwives to attend the slave masters' wives during birth.
They literally were an integral part of like the healing that had to take place after so much abuse, right? Now, what happened? Like, it got demonized. We had medicine come in and really like destroy the reputations of these midwives.
In the early 20th century, however, as childbirth became medicalized, physicians emerged as the primary birth attendants, and childbirth moved from the home to the hospital.
The advancement of medicine has not saved us. Like, it has not created better birthing outcomes. And so as much as people are like, oh, I thought you were just bringing towels and pots, I always like to say, like, put a little bit of respect on them, because even though that's all they brought, they had an arsenal of education and knowledge that they brought from wherever they came from, right? Those things weren't forgotten, and we still have better birthing outcomes under those conditions. Like, I'm honored to continue that legacy.
Thanks, Maya. And this is a really important topic because infant mortality rates are especially high for Black women. And I understand that Townsend spoke with you about some of her future goals.
Yes, she wants to work with different South Carolina political officials to make it easier for more midwives to want to come practice in South Carolina. And she also wants to build a birth center in different rural areas in South Carolina. She definitely wants to be a part of the solution.
All right, Maya, thanks so much. After the break, a week-long celebration honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. will introduce you to the group that influenced the city of Myrtle Beach to officially recognize the MLK holiday. Welcome back to Honoring Black History. Here on the Grand Strand, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day is celebrated for an entire week thanks to hard work from the Carolina African American Heritage Foundation. The group plans Grand Strand Freedom Week, which has been a staple since 2005. The celebration honors the life and work of Martin Luther King Jr. and his dedication to service and justice. It kicks off with the MLK Parade and moves into a series of workshops focusing on topics like diversity, equity, and human affairs. A highlight of the event is the Drum Major Awards and breakfast that recognizes people for their outstanding work in the community. Launching this event helped fill a gap in the city.
The city of Myrtle Beach didn't take time out to observe Dr. Martin Luther King. It's about giving people hope and letting them see that there is hope in our community here in the Grand Strand and bringing people together.
The Carolina African American Heritage Foundation's efforts to get the city of Myrtle Beach to recognize MLK Day began in 2007. They organized a coalition of churches, family, friends, and neighbors that urged the city of Myrtle Beach to officially recognize the holiday. In 2008, their efforts were successful. In Florence County, Yamikia Robinson is making history as the first African American female mayor of Lake City. Robinson was a councilwoman for 2 years before becoming mayor. As a Lake City native, she says she's familiar with the needs and concerns of people there. She started a roundtable community conversation that allows residents to bring their concerns to elected officials. She also started an initiative to inspire young people to become involved in local government. Robinson encourages youth everywhere to be the change they want to see in the world.
The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. And I think kids need to know that it's beautiful to have the skin that they're in.
After the break, a Low Country native is spreading the message that love is stronger than hate to kids across the country. Welcome back. Chris Singleton, a former pro baseball player, became a nationally renowned speaker, spreading messages of tolerance, forgiveness, and love after his mother was killed in the 2015 shooting at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston. Singleton's visit to Charleston was a part of his Black History Month reading tour. He talked about his heroes like Jackie Robinson and LeBron James. He hopes students will be motivated to chase their dreams by hearing his words.
I think every kid should feel celebrated, regardless of where they're from, what they look like. And so doing that in my hometown is definitely something I get to smile about.
This month, we are honoring outstanding Black-owned businesses in our area. One nonprofit is focusing on furthering the education of low-income students on the Grand Strand. The vision of Freedom Readers is to end the cycle of poverty by providing opportunities for children to improve their reading skills and their academic performance. Freedom Readers provide one-to-one literacy tutoring, free books, and an inspiring high-energy learning environment. They've been doing this for 13 years. The executive director says reading is the foundation for everything. That's why they use literacy as a launchpad to teach everything from public speaking to money management. The goal is to set these students up for success in school and in their future careers.
I really understood how important it was to have a strong background and foundation in reading, because without that, you really aren't able to go much further in any of the other subjects. Everything that I was learning told me that it was very important for kids to practice reading at home and also for them to have home libraries. So that's what I wanted to provide for this community.
For more coverage on the Freedom Readers, including a heartwarming story of one student finding his voice, head to WBTW.com. The shortage of teachers in America is a national issue, but another concern is the lack of Black male teachers. There's an organization found in colleges and universities across the country that hopes to change this. The Call Me Mr. program recruits and trains men of color to become teachers with the hopes of increasing the number of Black males teaching in U.S. public schools. The organization says less than 2% of teachers in America are Black men, but men of color make up about 7% of the U.S. population. Black male educators say it's beneficial when kids see an instructor who looks like them and deals with similar life experiences and biases.
A lot of times Black males are portrayed as thugs or violent just because I may have my hair locked. But I try to show myself as an intelligent individual. I go to class. I try to show myself in a positive light rather than the negative aspect that social media does.
Coastal Carolina University is one of the many state colleges with this program.
Good time, a good time. We gon' have a time.
Coming up next, the two-time Grammy Award-winning low country group that's breaking barriers with their unique style of music. Welcome back. It's a soulful sound, one that's preserving history. 5 friends from the Charleston-based band Ranky Tanky performed songs inspired by the Gullah culture, singing, clapping their hands, and stomping their feet, music and sounds that originated among the descendants of Africans who were enslaved and brought to the coastal South. Good Time in 2019 helped the group score their first Grammy for Best Regional Roots Album, marking the first Gullah recognition in Grammy history. They won another Grammy this year.
It's just an honor to be there, honestly, and still have the Academy acknowledge and to represent our Gullah heritage and our Gullah culture, which has never been done before.
The Gullah community is all about love and uplifting, everybody and everything around them.
Ranky Tanky is expected to release their 3rd studio album later this year. Continuing with the arts, a nationally renowned African-American theater director breaking barriers and making history in the arts now has a book out highlighting his journey. Tony-nominated director Sheldon Epps has directed major productions on and off Broadway and at many theaters across America. His love for theater started at just 8 years old when he saw a production at Pasadena Playhouse. After graduating from the Carnegie Mellon acting program, he started directing in a tiny off-Broadway theater and worked his way up to direct Broadway shows. His career came full circle when he became one of the first Black artistic directors at Pasadena Playhouse. His memoir, My Own Directions, shares the challenges Epps faced being a Black director and how Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech impacted his life.
I obviously was inspired by that speech early on, as many people of my generation were, and have always kept that idea in my soul and my heart. Having a dream, believing in it, believing in yourself, knowing you can accomplish anything and everything, no matter what the world might tell you, no matter what restrictions are put on you about what you can do or shouldn't do.
Epps conceived and directed the Duke Ellington musical, Play On, which received 3 Tony Award nominations. He also directed the highly acclaimed musical Blues in the Night. While Epps says African Americans have made great strides in the arts, there's still a long way to go.
Where we still can make some advancements is people in the decision-making positions, people who run the studios and run the networks and can, what you call, green light a project, say, okay, this is a go project. And that's so important because those are really the people who are deciding what stories we get to see or don't see, and who's going to be involved, and what's the nature of the cast and the director and the producer. So it's really important that we have more people in leadership positions and the decision-making positions. And again, that is changing, but much too slowly.
The book, My Own Directions, serves as an inspiration for young people who have dreams of being in the arts. To find out more about it and Epps' journey, look for this story on WBTW.com. And thank you for watching this News 13 Honoring Black History special. We hope you've been inspired by the people we've introduced you to this morning as we honor Black history and the stories of African American communities across the nation and right here in South Carolina. But it doesn't stop here. You can do your own research and learn more about the history and share what you learn with others. Enjoy the rest of your day.